Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Alicia Edwards. Coming up tonight, fire concerns as more than 1,000 residential buildings in the capital still have serious safety failings, almost 5 years after the Grenfell Tower tragedy. We'll have more on how the government is tackling the issue. As inflation rises to 9%, 60% of Londoners say they aren't changing their lifestyle to adapt. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. There is rain on the way, plus with just over 2 weeks to go until the Jubilee celebrations begin, Bake Off star Christelle has her tips on how you can wow your neighbours with your street party offerings, and a modern take on The Jungle Book, bringing the classic tale to the city. All of that on the way, but first this evening, the boss of the London Fire Brigade has said it is extremely concerning that more than 1,000 residential buildings in the capital still have serious fire safety failings, almost 5 years after the Grenfell Tower tragedy. It follows the Home Secretary announcing that a new fire reform white paper will incorporate more recommendations from the first phase of the Grenfell inquiry. The Brigade's Commissioner, Andy Rowe, welcomed the planned government legislation, but said more needs to be done to tackle dangerous structures and to make sure that residents know how to escape their building in the event of a fire. Well, Priti Patel has been at Old Kent Road Fire Station today. She said the fire service has been scarred by Grenfell.
The fire reform white paper is absolutely integral to the big reforms that we are bringing forward to effectively put public safety first. And we're here today in London at the Old Kent Road Fire Station, where of course there are many officers here who day in, day out deal with high-rise buildings and fires. And of course this white paper builds upon so many recommendations and lessons post-Grenfell, and it's important that actually we operationalise that, we put it into practice, but there's much more as well in terms of the training, the development and the professionalisation of the fire service that is contained within this white paper, and that's important. So in a similar way in which we have, almost re-galvanised police training through the National College of Policing, we're looking at how we can professionalise fire through a fire training college and really talk about how we invest in our fire officers. There have been so many recommendations post-Grenfell, and Grenfell is just the most appalling tragedy. I think, London, there's no doubt, London has been scarred by that. I think the London Fire Service has been as well. Look at the inquiries that have ensued and been undertaken. Just look at the learnings that have come out of that and the sheer trauma for families as well. We have to be very respectful and reflective of that, we really do. But what I would say is that it is vitally important that the service never stands still and that the service learns constantly. The fire reform white paper certainly looks at all the learnings, all the recommendations, and it's how we can do better and be better to protect the public, not just in London but across the country.
There we are, Home Secretary Priti Patel there at Old Kent Road Fire Station. On to some other stories from today in the capital. A 21-year-old woman who was found stabbed to death in an alleyway in West London has been named by police as Anya Jedrzikowiak. Detectives investigating the incident have made a second arrest. A 20-year-old man who was arrested on suspicion of murder has since been released with no further action. Officers are speaking with Anya's next of kin and they're being supported by specialist officers. Strike action has been announced on the Tube network during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend in a move that threatens to cause significant travel disruption in the capital. Tube staff in the RMT union have threatened to walk out of Euston and Green Park stations on Friday the 3rd of June over bullying allegations and what they call a toxic working environment. The strikes will last the entire day and affect Victoria Jubilee and Piccadilly line services at both stations. National Rail services at Euston will not be affected. The parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction to a Pret baguette have set up a groundbreaking trial aiming to make food allergies history. Londoners Tanya and Nadim Ednan Laperouse have launched the trial to investigate whether peanut and milk products taken under medical supervision can be used as a treatment for people with food allergies. Their daughter, Natasha Ednan Laperouse, died in 2016 after she suffered a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a Pret baguette. Now, former England footballer Alex Scott has been to visit a primary school in northwest London to talk to children about being a role model. Research by Lego has shown around 4 in 5 young girls are inspired by women who challenge gender expectations, and Alex has been encouraging young Londoners not to be afraid to push their boundaries.
I'm here today at Anson Primary School with the Lego group to surprise a Year 4 class. I can't wait to see their reaction. Hello everyone! Well, that was a reaction. Thank you for that. How are you all? Good. It was really special to hear the kids speak about family members or coaches that have motivated them or played a part in their life. So this is your Play Your Own Way worksheet that I took part in today with the class, and I filled in my tree, and at the top is my mum, who's always been an inspiration and a role model to me in my life for a lot of reasons, as well as my mum, former Arsenal player Ian Wright, because I always looked up to him when I was younger playing, always played with a massive smile on his face, and that was an influence on me that every time I stepped out and played for Arsenal or England, that I was always remembering to smile and enjoy it. I've also over here got the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena Williams. I think growing up, seeing what they managed to play at Wimbledon and go on to be successful like they are, breaking down so many stereotypes and a lot of things along the way really inspired me to, really aim high and reach for my dreams in terms of football. And then I've got my teachers and my coaches, obviously have played a huge part in my life. It'd be huge if the England team won this summer. I think we're on the cusp of something special anyway with women's football. And I just think a lot has gone into making this tournament the best. I believe it will be the best Euros that we've seen. Games are already sold out. So now we just need England to get to that final and lift that trophy. And I really think it will take the sport to the next level and inspire a lot of people.
There we are, former England footballer Alex Scott there at that primary school in northwest London. Now, a rainbow 50p coin is being released to mark the 50th anniversary of the Pride movement in the UK. The coin features Pride in London's values of protest, visibility, unity and equality in rainbows, with the Pride progression flag in the middle. It's been designed by Londoner Dominique Holmes, who's an artist and an LGBTQ+ activist. A donation will be made to London LGBT Community Pride as part of the launch, and the coin will not enter circulation but will be available online. Right, it's time to take a look at the weather now. Cloud cover coming in this evening, and there are some rainy spells to be expected overnight. Thunderstorms are heading over the capital, but clearing in time for the morning, making way for a sunny start to the day tomorrow with highs of 22 degrees and uninterrupted sunshine. I'm afraid it's not such a cheery picture on Friday. The rain is making a return, but clearing up in time for the weekend. Highs of 21 degrees on Saturday and Sunday. Something to look forward to. And just before the break, let's take a look at these pictures from London Zoo, where zookeepers have had their hands full in the penguin nursery this month, feeding and caring for 5 hungry Humboldt penguin chicks after their parents were unable to look after them. They've been using toy penguins to help care for the chicks, who have been weighed every morning and are hand-fed 3 times a day. After 10 weeks, the penguins will be moved into the zoo's nursery pool. Very cute. Right, it's time for a break now, but coming up, are we all eating too much sugar? We'll have more and how you can cut down in just a few minutes.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, a story affecting people in the capital and across the country today as inflation has hit 9%, the highest rate for 40 years. The surge has come as millions of people saw an unprecedented rise in energy costs just last month. Michael Hewson is the chief market analyst at CMC Markets and says the blame lies with the government and energy companies.
The populist knee-jerk reaction would be to impose a windfall tax, but the downside to that is that it could prevent the oil companies from investing in the transition to renewables. And one of the reasons why we've got this really high push higher in energy prices is not just about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's also the fact that demand for fossil fuels is higher than ever. And unfortunately, with energy companies under pressure to cut back on oil and gas resources, you've got what is known as a supply pinch. So part of that is government's fault for not having a transition policy in place. And obviously part of that is energy companies' fault for not investing fast enough in renewables. So what's needed now is government and fossil fuel companies basically working with each other to create that transition to renewables energy policy.
There we are, Michael Hewson there. Well, as that news about the inflation rise settles in, new research has found that Londoners are most likely to be unperturbed by the cost of living crisis, with 60% saying it will have little to no effect on their lifestyle. The research has been conducted by Lucid and showed that consumers are most likely to cut back on dining at restaurants and clothing to cope with the cost of living. The global president at Advertising Week Europe, Ruth Mortimer, has been talking me through the findings.
In some senses, Londoners are much more optimistic than the rest of the UK. But then also nearly half of Londoners told us that actually they felt the cost of living crisis would impact their mental health, which makes us feel that probably, even though people are feeling that they want to be positive about it, they're also quite worried.
Absolutely. 15% of Londoners say that they don't know if their bills have increased. This research would have been taken out quite soon after these energy prices increased. Do you think maybe further down the line, if you did the same research again, you'd probably have a different response?
Yes, I think you're probably right. I think we could see actually in the rest of the country, people are already substantially changing their lifestyles to react to this. And I think what's happening is you're just seeing a slight lag in London, busy capital city, one of the wealthiest parts of the UK. I think it's just taking a while to catch up, but I think we will see the same trend there too.
So for those who are making cutbacks, they're saying that it's going to be on things like dining and clothing, big industries here in London.
Yeah, I think this is quite worrying for many of kind of London's biggest retail brands, obviously the hospitality industry. They've already had a terrible couple of years with the pandemic. And this new cost of living research suggests that people are going to cut back further. The other area that I think we're seeing them say they're going to cut back in is things like streaming services. And I think maybe that reflects the fact that people spent the last 2 years sitting in their houses. We know that people often invested in multiple streaming services. And so some of this might just be a bit of a correction of people saying, now I'm going out more. I don't need quite as many streaming services, subscriptions as I once had.
You obviously spend a lot of time talking to these big brands. What's their reaction to these findings?
I think everybody is understandably nervous and thinking about what they can do to make it as minimal as possible for consumers. You know, nobody wants people not to be able to afford their products. Marketers are thinking about ways they can change their supply chains that mean it's much more efficient so you don't order products you don't need. I think brands are really thinking hard about how they're going to be able to deal with this because they believe there is a big impact coming.
Yeah, more on the way. Other areas people say they're cutting back is on gym memberships, but not on holidays, I noticed.
Well, I think, again, coming back to what people have experienced over the last few years, I think people are making choices based on what they value right now. And I think lots of people didn't have holidays. We saw people spending much more on things like homeware, for example, for the last 2 years, investing in their home. So really, people are feeling that for the first time in 2 years, they want to go on holiday. So I actually think the travel industry will be more insulated from this than it otherwise might have been.
There we are, Ruth Mortimer there on the impact of that inflation rise and how Londoners have been affected. Now, new research has shown that some of the nation's favourite sweets contain up to 111% of the recommended daily amount, and people in London are regularly consuming twice the recommended amount. What's more, parents in the capital have been overestimating the amount of sugar children should consume by 50%. Well, here to take us through those findings is Dale Pinnock, a presenter and nutritionist who's campaigning for people to have a better understanding of their diet. Dale, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
So how much sugar as adults are we allowed a day?
So we're talking about added sugars here. The upper limit is 30 grams. Now, as a nutritionist, I think that's quite high, but that's what the NHS are recommending we shouldn't exceed. But as you rightly say, some of our favourite snacks in this country are going way beyond that, 35, 40, sometimes even 50 grams of added sugar in one single hit. And I think the biggest issue here is so few of us actually realise what that recommended limit actually is. 3% of adults in the UK actually know what that is. So that's the problem in itself, I think.
Lots of people, when they're looking at those labels, check the calories, but maybe don't look further down the list. Is the calories, does it give any indication of that, or do we really need to be looking at for the sugars?
We need to go deeper. So in general, when you look at a nutrition label, you'll see the amount of carbohydrate, and then look underneath it and see of which sugars. If that's very, very high, that already gives you an inclination that there's going to be a lot of added sugar in the food. But the thing is, there's no specific legislation at the moment that is forcing manufacturers to display how much added sugar is on there. So this is one of the things that Grays have created. They've created the No Added Sugar Index, which has been created with the University of Glasgow, where you can actually go onto this tool, put in your favourite snacks and find out exactly how much added sugar is lurking there. And once you realise that and realise that the recommended limit is 30 grams, you can then obviously make choices based around that.
So go on then, Dale, spoil all of our favourite snacks. Which ones are the worst that maybe we wouldn't be expecting to be so bad?
You know what, I mean, without kind of like sort of going directly for the jugular with sort of specific products, I think we're all really aware of things like chocolates and sweets, but sometimes things like cereal bars that are often marketed as being very, very healthy can have vast amounts of added sugar in there. And then there's things like sauces, things like ready meals, even breads, even things like packaged sushi within the rice. There's loads and loads of added sugar. So this is very, very wide reaching. It's not just the obvious things like the chocolate bars. This is making its way into lots of everyday products.
If people don't notice maybe the physical impacts of eating sugar, it might make them less likely to make those changes. What are the risks of eating too much sugar in your diet?
One of the most damaging things to our long-term health are the refined carbohydrates, and the worst of the refined carbohydrates are the added sugars. It can have multiple negative impacts upon our metabolic health. So to be fair, if you just eat a little bit of sugar now and again, it's going to do absolutely nothing. But the pattern of consumption is the concern here. So if you're consuming very, very high amounts of refined carbohydrates for every meal, day in, day out, week in, week out, etc., you're going to start impacting many aspects of your metabolic health. So it can start to send cholesterol up. It can start to send blood pressure up. It can increase your risk of type 2 diabetes. It can fuel the flame of obesity as well, because huge amounts of glucose in circulation is a big problem, and the body needs to cope with it. And it does that by converting it into triglycerides and dumping it within our fat tissue. So in the long term, it can start to damage many elements of our health. And if you look around, certainly pre-pandemic at least, you look at the biggest burdens on our healthcare system, it was type 2 diabetes, it was cardiovascular disease, it was obesity. These things were burdening our healthcare system, and they can be directly linked to some of these dietary and lifestyle components, such as refined carbohydrates.
Dale, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Dale Pinnock there. You're watching London Live News with Alicia Edwards. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break, plus the Great British Bake Off finalist Christelle on how we can all be star bakers for the upcoming Jubilee.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back. Time now for a reminder of our main story this evening. The boss of the London Fire Brigade has said it is extremely concerning that more than 1,000 residential buildings in the capital still have serious fire safety failings almost 5 years after the Grenfell Tower tragedy. It follows the Home Secretary announcing that a new fire reform white paper will incorporate more recommendations from the first phase of the inquiry. The Brigade's Commissioner, Andy Rowe, welcomed the planned government legislation, but said more needs to be done to tackle dangerous structures and to make sure that residents know how to escape their building in the event of a fire. Priti Patel has been at Old Kent Road Fire Station today, and she said the fire service has been scarred by Grenfell.
So the fire reform white paper is absolutely integral to the big reforms that we are bringing forward to effectively put public safety first. There have been so many recommendations post-Grenfell, and Grenfell is just the most appalling tragedy. I think, London, there's no doubt, London has been scarred by that. I think the London Fire Service has been as well. Look at the inquiries that have ensued and been undertaken. Just look at the learnings that have come out of that and the sheer trauma for families as well. We have to be very respectful and reflective of that, we really do. But what I would say is that it is vitally important that the service never stands still and that the service learns constantly. The fire reform white paper certainly looks at all the learnings, all the recommendations, and it's how we can do better and be better to protect the public, not just in London but across the country.
There we are, Home Secretary Priti Patel there at Old Kent Road Fire Station. On to some other stories from today in the capital. A 21-year-old woman who was found stabbed to death in an alleyway in West London has been named by police as Anya Jedrzikowiak. Detectives investigating the incident have made a second arrest. A 20-year-old man who was arrested on suspicion of murder has since been released with no further action. Officers are speaking with Anya's next of kin and they're being supported by specialist officers. Strike action has been announced on the Tube network during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend in a move that threatens to cause significant travel disruption in the capital. Tube staff in the RMT union have threatened to walk out of Euston and Green Park stations on Friday the 3rd of June over bullying allegations and what they call a toxic working environment. The strikes will last the entire day and affect Victoria, Jubilee and Piccadilly line services at both stations. National Rail services at Euston will not be affected. Now, as the capital prepares to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, new research has found that street parties are the way Brits feel it best to celebrate this summer. One of the ways some will be marking the occasion is through the charity project, the Big Jubilee Lunch, which is helping people bring their local communities together. Well, here to tell us more about how you can get involved is Bake Off finalist Christelle. Thank you so much for joining me. So it's all about people getting together as a community, and obviously food is a big part of that. How can people get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I am all for food. You know, food is my life. And I think what's so great about the Big Jubilee Lunch is it's all about people getting together with their communities, their local neighbourhoods. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a street party. It can even be just going to your neighbour's house, having a cup of tea and a slice of cake, which I do basically almost every single day. But there are starter packs. Obviously, there's about 2 weeks ago, but it's not too late. If you go to the bigjubileelunch.com, you can download a whole starter pack that sort of, it gives you tips on how to host a street party, tips on, you know, what you need to do to kind of get, you know, permission to have a party on your street. There's also recipes that, you know, many of us have submitted. So there's a recipe I've got on there for some miso, mushroom, ricotta, crostini. So there's lots of stuff on there. But I would really encourage, you know, everyone to kind of get stuck in. And I think what's so great about these sort of, you know, community events is we're so busy in our day-to-day lives. You know, everyone's busy working, you know, in different parts of London or, you know, around the globe. And I think we don't have a lot of time to spend with our local neighbourhoods. And I think this is a perfect excuse to do it and the perfect excuse to have a party anyway. So, I mean, who would say no to a party? I definitely wouldn't. So.
Yeah, I can imagine all of your neighbours are going to be looking to you and what you're going to be bringing to the local street party.
Probably. I actually, I was chatting to someone about this before, but whenever I recipe test stuff, I have lots of surplus just baked goods in my house all the time. And so my neighbours basically get first dibs. So they get lots of my baked goods all the time. So I think they will probably be expecting something. And I will definitely be delivering for sure.
Amazing. I need to move into your area, I think. So if people do want to get involved and maybe they're not as confident at baking or cooking, what would you recommend? I know you mentioned one there, but what kinds of things can people get making to try out their hand at cooking?
Yeah, I think a really simple thing to make, which personally for me, I think doesn't require any skill, are blondies. Brownies are actually a bit trickier because you've got to whisk your eggs, but blondies, it's literally you dump everything in one bowl and that's it, and it's done. And the good thing about blondies is you're supposed to underbake them because they're supposed to be really gooey. So blondies, I would say, is one of the quickest things to make. Also, a very simple no-churn ice cream. The base of any no-churn ice cream is double cream and condensed milk. That's it. And you just whip the double cream, add in condensed milk and put it in the freezer, and you've literally got the quickest no-churn ice cream, which is also perfect for this weather. So those, I think, are the quickest things to make. But also, I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but if you're not a confident cook or a baker, you can even just go and get lots of bits of party food and just, you know, eat food together. You know, for picnics, people are always bringing, you know, little bags of crisps and sausage rolls and fruit and, you know, a bottle of Prosecco with some plastic cups. You know, things like that are so nice to have. Obviously, I would always recommend trying to make something because I'm obviously a cook and I just love doing that. But obviously, if you're not a competent cook, I think it's mainly just about eating together with your communities, feeding people, and just spending that quality time that you don't usually get.
Now, you speak about, giving things a bit of a go, pushing your boundaries a bit. We obviously all saw you on screen doing just that. How much did being part of the show kind of push your boundaries of what you thought you were capable of before?
Oh, it really pushed my boundaries. And I think for me, I had about 3 years of experience baking when I applied. And I applied for the show thinking, oh, I won't get on this time, so hopefully by my 3rd attempt, I'll be on the show, so I'll have 3 more years of experience. That was my mindset. So when I got onto the show with 3 years of experience, I really panicked because I thought, no, this wasn't supposed to happen. Like, I wasn't supposed to get on. I'm really going to embarrass myself. It's all going to be a nightmare. So that was really stressful. But it was just everything. I think almost every single bake on that show I'd never done before. Like, I'd obviously never made an anti-gravity cake. I'd never made, an interactive toy made out of biscuits. I'd never made a 3-layer Joconde Bavarois dessert. I mean, what does that even mean? So I think everything required so much research, trial and error. But I think what it's taught me, without sounding really cheesy, is that nothing is really that impossible. And I think for me, that one thing that kind of kept me going was I have such a passion for food, for cooking, for baking, for flavors. And because I was just so passionate about it, and I was just so determined to really create, really tasty, well-baked goods, I just kept on going and practicing until I kind of got it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great hobby. It's one of mine as well.
It's not a great hobby for the waistline, but, it's still fun.
No, it really isn't. We obviously, another competition that we've seen recently on screen was people battling it out to make the Platinum Jubilee pudding. It ended up going to the lemon Swiss roll and amaretti trifle. What are your thoughts on that one? Do you think it was a worthy winner?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even just the description of the desserts making my mouth water. And what I love about sort of baking, and it's something that I do a lot, which is why I really like the winning dessert, is it's about adding small twists to a classical dish. And so, adding lemon to a classic, classic Swiss roll that doesn't have lemon, or adding amaretti to a trifle is so unique and so different, but you're still keeping that quintessentially British feel about the dessert. So I think, 12 out of 10 for me. But I think the whole concept of the show, the fact that it's in conjunction with the Queen's Jubilee, it just is another celebration to celebrate our British culture, and obviously to bake. And I think I love any excuse to bake, and obviously to then eat the baked goods. So I think it was a really, really lovely event, and the fact that it also got turned into a show as well that got aired on TV, I think was so lovely. A really, really lovely, wholesome event that took place.
Yeah, a twist on a classic. Oh, Christelle, thank you so much. It's been such a joy to chat to you today.
Likewise, Alicia. Take care.
Bye. There we are, Christelle there, finalist of the Great British Bake Off. Right, it's time for a break now, but coming up... Tales of rocker Janis Joplin as a new show about the 60s musical icon arrives in Islington.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back to the final part of London Live News at 6. Now, following the life of 60s icon Janis Joplin, a new musical production about the rock star is opening in Islington next week. Performed by singer Colette Cooper, the production includes all of the greatest hits and some original material as well. The one-woman show is set at the US festival Woodstock, where Joplin would perform late into the night. Well, Colette has been chatting to Hebe ahead of the run.
Oh mama, all dreams come true. If only in my dreams. Wow, yeah.
It's a really tough role because she's a tough character to capture, you know. She was a very troubled soul. She was a genius. She was an absolute musical genius. She was the first queen of rock. She was revolutionary. There was nobody like her when she was in her full, swing. This woman came alive, this raw talent in a time where women were, had a place. They had a place in life, and that was to be quiet. They weren't supposed to know anything below the belt, didn't swear, prom and proper, got married when they left school, that kind of era. And she came out, free spirit, and rocked the boat, and that's what she did. And she died at an early age. She died at 27 from, she was part of the 27 Club. She died of a heroin overdose, but she was, she was a pacifist. She was pacifist, peacemaker. She was anti-war. She fought for that, and she was a voice for the people. She was into, equality. She came from a time in a backwoods town called Port Arthur, who was very much still into segregation, and she fought against that, and she was bullied for that. and she suffered a lot of, bullying and pain growing up, and because of her beliefs. She was a very, very kind soul, really, and this immense talent.
And given that Janis Joplin stood for so much politically, socially, what are you hoping that the audience coming to see the performance are going to learn and take away from it?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because the play, when I wrote it a few years back before the pre-pandemic, it has such parallels of today, with today's issues. I think mostly they'll relate to it. It's very relatable, and from her story, from when she was growing up in the 60s, I think you'll just see parallel stories of, peace, war, race, women, women's lib fighting. I think there's a lot of parallels. So hopefully they'll go away and it'll resonate with them.
How's it been for you? Do you see similarities in your personality that you do in Janis's, or is it harder kind of recreating a person that really did exist and is so prominent in history?
Yeah, very good question. Well, I didn't know much about Janis Joplin before I took on the role and started writing the play, because I knew a couple of songs, but I didn't really know her history, and it was because I was compared to her. I'm a blues and jazz singer, and I was compared to her throughout the years. People kept saying, "Oh, you're very similar to Janis Joplin," or Edith Piaf, and I thought, oh, okay, I want to know more about this woman. And then I found her story amazing, and I started writing about it. I thought I'd like to play her. So, physically, I had to change as well. So I grew my hair, I put on a few pounds, because she was a lovely and curvaceous, and I was this like skinny little thing. And so I wanted to be, physically look like her as much as I could. Yes, definitely similarities. My biggest musical influence is Bessie Smith, and that's hers. So I was like, wow, this is great. And I guess we're very similar. Politically, we have the same, social values. So many things that are similar. And the more I got to know her by reading about her and research, it's like, wow, we're so similar. And, growing up, she was never the typical pretty girl growing up, as, she said that herself. And she always felt a little bit of a misfit. I did feel like that growing up. I wasn't your typical pretty girl. I was quite a tomboy. And I think some of my views in my early days, I did feel a little bit of a misfit. So many similar things, and we've got similar voices naturally. Yeah, I'm enjoying playing her, but it's hard because it's a roller coaster of emotions, and she's tough to play. I don't want to. It's not an impersonation. I'm giving an interpretation of her, and hopefully, I do a good interpretation.
There we are, that was Colette chatting to Hebe, and the play is on from next Tuesday, the 24th of May, until the 11th of June at the Old Red Lion Theatre in Islington. Plenty of time to see that one. Now, a modern take on The Jungle Book is coming to the Pleasance Theatre after gaining recognition at the Edinburgh Fringe. The Concrete Jungle Book sees a female Mowgli navigate tricky relationships, issues with housing, and trying to find herself in the backdrop of green spaces turning into cityscapes. Tanya has been speaking to the director and one of the cast about this rap and reggae-infused performance.
We wanted to keep the essence of the Jungle Book and the idea of this like feral child that like really struggles to like find a home and finds belonging and friendship and like parenting. So to do that, like we've really modernized it and put it in today. It sits in a world that's super contemporary and relevant to what our audiences are, which is, young non-white first-time theatre goers who have never really had necessarily like full representation when it comes to going to the theatre. So what we've done is we've like given them a platform with a show that is like completely relevant to their lives today, but also offers a twist on a really like, you know, epic classic story that like you say, everybody really knows and finds like relevance with in their own lives.
Mowgli in this version of the show is a girl, so that already changes how we interact, like how we it just changes the dynamic of the show already. It's set in modern day, like set on the streets as opposed to the jungle, so that's already something that makes it, you know, super relatable to audiences of like contemporary London. And I guess the music is something that's a big key difference in our show. Like we've got grime, rap, reggae, like just like a whole variety of different genres that again are relatable to the people of today, but also especially the youth.
We have really worked hard to make this not like a remake of the Jungle Book. Like we were talking the other day, we could have very much called it something else, but we didn't, and we're kind of standing strong by the fact that it is a remake of the Jungle Book, even though it does go in very, very different directions to what people might be excuse me, expecting with the work. So there's a lot of shocks and a lot of changes that we're always excited to share with people.
Some of those, or many of those, I imagine, shocks and twists are delivered on stage by you, Nikki, because you are playing the lead character of Mo. Tell us a bit about the storyline for Mo, what it was like taking on that character, and you don't have to give anything away, but some of the twists and turns that people might find most unexpected in Mo.
For me, it was quite a journey actually, because I remember at the start of the rehearsal process being like, oh, like, you know, this girl was homeless. She is put out on the streets by herself. She has to fend for herself. Like, I was like, oh, I'm so far away from her. And then I remember like throughout the process, like it got to a point where I had like a breakdown, because I was like, whoa, like I'm actually so similar. Like she's a lone wolf. She has a tough exterior. She keeps going. Very direct, like wears her heart on her sleeve kind of thing. And it was quite a shock. I was like, oh wow, like she's a lot more relatable than you think. And I think that's what's really nice about our version of it. It's like our characters are very fantastical, but their like struggles, their identities, everything's super relatable to everyday people. So yeah, I think her main objective in our version is to find community and to find her identity, because as much as she, like, what I like about her is that she knows what she deserves at such a young age. Like, it's more than I can say for myself at 16. Do you know what I mean?
Well, as well as that amazing storyline of her, you know, trying to come back to herself or even find herself, the play covers a lot of really important issues that loads of Londoners face. You mentioned there, you know, the one of not only finding your home in yourself, but actually having a home and the issue of homelessness. What are some of the main themes that, you know, that are explored in the play that you think Londoners today are actually also struggling with?
I guess it's good to give a bit of a backdrop about the work that we do with High Rise. So like we work with offering access to theatre and high art in a way that the communities that we work with often don't get those access points at the same time as some other people who are maybe come from a private school and are into like watching theatre and being told about theatre a lot earlier in their lives. So we offer that access point, and we're all trained youth workers as well as being directors and writers and actors, performers, rappers, like all of these things. But the core of our being and our essence is understanding what the challenges are for young audiences and young people who are interested in taking in stories and telling stories themselves. So throughout this show, like we've been working with young people who have only been in London for a week, like refugees, all the way to Londoners that were brought up, like born and bred in the city.
And just what the theatre landscape should be more like, you know? Because like it's just, yeah, because if I saw something like this when I was like those kids' age, like it just would have changed my whole outlook on like coming into this industry, the fact that I could, like, it just, you know, it's really special that this is something that we're all a part of.
There we go, Dominic and Nikki there, and the show is on at the Pleasance Theatre from next Wednesday, the 25th of May, until the 11th of June. Right, just before we leave you, let's take a quick look at the weather. Cloud cover is coming in this evening, and we can expect some rainy spells overnight. Thunderstorms are heading over the capital, but it's clearing though in time for the morning, making way for a sunny day tomorrow, highs of 22 degrees and uninterrupted sunshine. It's not such a cheery picture on Friday though, I'm afraid. The rain is making a return, but clearing up in time for the weekend, highs of 21 degrees on Saturday and Sunday. Looking forward to that sunshine. Right, and that's all from the London Live News team. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow for more updates throughout the day. Follow us on our social channels at London Live. From all of us here, have a lovely evening.